Hi, my name is Emily Lankiewicz, and I'm here today to talk about my project, New Ways of Seeing. This project is about creating interactive 3D models of objects from the Mount Holyoke College Art Museum collection. Digital technology is fast becoming part of our daily lives and pop culture. Video games in particular are becoming mainstream mediums that provide a way in which creators can immerse their players within other worlds, time periods, and even lives. Many are also beginning to incorporate aspects of cultural heritage and art and architectural history. Despite often shaky historical facts mixed with myth, video games are able to carry with them this concept of exploring the past or another world through a digital and 3D medium. Games like the most recent Tomb Raider allows players to closely investigate objects or relics they have found on their adventure in a weightless environment as they search for clues and more insight into what they have found. So, how did the project get started? As I had mentioned, I was inspired by pop culture's treatment of cultural heritage. If this type of learning, immersion, and study can be applied to a video game, why not be used by actual art historians? I was also inspired by my study abroad experience. I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh in the spring of 2016, and I took an archaeology class there where I learned about 3D modeling and digital recreations and how they're fast becoming a growing field. When I returned home, back to Mount Holyoke College, I began working with the Mount Holyoke College Art Museum and started to teach myself how to make 3D models based on some brief training I received while I was abroad. The technique that I use to make these models is called photogrammetry. Originating in the sciences, it was used to make measurements based on photographs. It was used by mapmakers and the military. Over time, this technology has been repurposed by both archaeologists and artists as a technique for making 3D models based on multiple photographs. It's helpful to think of your camera kind of like a scanner. You can use your camera to scan or create a model of a flat surface, the facade of a building or a wall, to capture the interior of a space, or to capture an isolated object. In this scenario, you would have your object in theory in the center of a space while you walked around it in a circle taking photographs as you went. Or, in my case, I placed the object onto a turntable while I remained stationary. This small bust of the Egyptian goddess Isis is of Roman origin, and it was placed onto a turntable and photographed every 10 degrees or so, as seen here. In addition, it was photographed from slightly above, slightly below, and also from the bottom, so that all angles are covered and scanned, so to speak. Once the photos are taken, they are run through a modeling program. I used Aegisoft Photoscan. As it goes through the motions, which are, for the most part, automated, it helps to think of this kind of like building a sculpture. First, you begin with your armature or skeleton, as seen on the left here, which is the point cloud. The next step is the creation of the mesh, which is kind of like building your clay. It's building your base. And the last step is adding your texture, which is your paint. And then, once your model is complete, it can be uploaded online to model sharing websites such as Sketchfab, or it can be imported into other 3D modeling programs where lighting and the environment can be changed. This and the following 3D models I created and selected each for a different reason or to address a particular issue. I was inspired by the ordinary and everyday objects that have really lost their context and sense of original use by being placed in a static museum display, much like this small Roman oil lamp. I was also interested in the intricate and often overlooked aspects of smaller objects, like this small silver Greek coin depicting Alexander the Great. Coins are also very difficult to display because they are made up of two sides, the obverse and the reverse, both of which are equally important, but cannot be displayed quite at the same time. I also focused on objects like this Greek makeup or jewelry box, known as a pyxis, that is unable to tell us its full story or be fully appreciated in a contained space, where one cannot completely walk around it or pick it up and turn it. Big institutions like the British Museum and the Smithsonian and many archaeological museums are beginning to use this technology. As it gets more sophisticated and more accurate, it is becoming more popular. And I would argue that this technology, particularly photogrammetry, is incredibly accessible. I was lucky enough to have access to a studio, but in theory, 3D models of objects can be created using something as simple as your camera phone. By no means do I think that this will replace the museum experience, but rather I think it will enhance it. I've broken these major benefits into 3 main categories. The first being accessibility. Museums as institutions are not incredibly accessible, but this is improving as time goes on. Many museum collections hold gems in storage, kind of hidden treasures that never really get to see the light of day. And a common figure that can be seen at big institutions and small institutions is that only about 4% of the entire collection is what you see on display. Some would argue that granting access, with this kind of free access, so to speak, will take away from the museum experience and take away economically as well as in terms of visitation from the museum. But actually this does the opposite. It proves to be a kind of publicity. It gets people excited about what a museum has to offer. The second major benefit is interactivity. This technology creates an enhanced relationship between a museum and its visitors. Objects are no longer confined to a static museum display, and one is able to use this technology as a tool to explore what a museum has to offer and to learn more about it with the ability to study it from anywhere, anytime, at your own pace. The final benefit, which is most important for the museum themselves, is conservation. While objects are now able to be shared with the world, in actuality, they are back home, safe, cared for, and curated at their home institution, and protected for any kind of damage or environmental impacts that may occur to the actual object. When an object is scanned, it takes on this kind of second digital life. Though it is not the actual object, it's kind of making a replica of sorts. So while I was doing this project, it seemed oddly familiar, but at the same time I remember thinking, why hasn't this been done before? And in actuality, it has. During the 19th and 20th centuries, plaster cast collections were at the height of their popularity. They could be found in academia for study, as seen here. This is a photograph of Mount Holyoke College's plaster cast collection, circa 1920. They could be found in artist studios to learn from the masters, and were also not only found in the homes of the very wealthy, but also the middle class, because plaster was an incredibly cheap material that could be used over and over again. Plaster casts allowed art to become accessible for a variety of purposes. And though this technology fell out of favor due to their bulky size and upkeep, where this technology leaves off, 3D modeling picks up. 3D printed objects of what you have scanned. So in fact, having a one-to-one replica once again to be able to physically hold in your hands.